That's all that counts, right, Chris? Is that
We'll have to
All right.
apologize to the public for technical difficulties.
We're trying.
All right.
I am.
Oh, Brian.
Are we back in business? I believe we are back. We are returning from public.
Can you mute your laptop?
I think we're returning to public session. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Oh, yeah, I'm seeing other people pop in here. It took us a few extra minutes to switch back. We're still trying to figure out the logistics of doing this hybrid meeting. As you can probably tell from your screens, the school committee is in person this evening at the Millennium School, along with some of our central administrators, and the public and our students and other presenters are joining us remotely from home. There are several ways that you can access this meeting. You may be watching us on Westford Cat on your television, the good old-fashioned way, and that works. You might be watching over Zoom. If you are watching over Zoom and you're having any difficulties with your sound, there are some other ways to watch us. And Chris, can we post those links?
Yep.
So in the chat for Zoom, if you are having any difficulties with your sound or understanding, you can try to go to Westford Cat's live stream on YouTube, and we found that the sound is working better there. So if you're having any accessibility issues, any difficulty hearing us, please check that. I'm also supposed to remind myself, because I wasn't doing it, and also the committee members, to make sure that your mic is close, so that hopefully all of the sound is getting picked up and transferred well. Did I miss anything on logistics there, Chris?
No, I'm going to put a link in the chat for people at home too, where you can go and follow along, submit questions. And if you are watching on YouTube or Westford Cat, you won't be in the chat, but we've made it such that if we have any links or announcements to share during the meeting, they'll show up there as well. So I'll put that link in now.
Okay. And the Airtable link is also available, so you can post questions there. If someone wants to make a public comment, we were able to logistically figure out how to do that with a guest last time. So if someone from the public does want to make a comment and they're not already a panelist, like our students and our other presenters, you can post a comment to the Airtable that says, yes, you would like to make a comment, and we will get you the appropriate information, the appropriate link, so that we can make sure that your voice is heard. So we're still trying to work all this out. Thank you for your patience as we're trying to juggle it. And with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I will turn it over to the superintendent.
All right, thank you. We had our first meeting of the COVID advisory Committee. Chris, is my audio on? For the first meeting of the COVID Advisory Committee this past week, and we will have additional upcoming meetings. What we are working on is a specific metric that we will be using in terms of making decisions and shifting between teaching and learning models from a hybrid to either fully remote or to full return. There are a number of variables that we're looking at, trying to select those that have the most meaning, both from assessing the transmission, likelihood of the virus in our school system, but also the operational impact. What are the number of absenteeisms of our students? What's the absenteeism of our staff and our staffing capacity to continue operations at any one point in time? So we want to be very methodical with that and make sure that the variables that we use have meaning. We will also, coming up next week, have a first diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting. Alicia and I have met to begin to talk about an agenda for the first meeting. We're going to be as active as possible this year. I will also keep you informed of the sports seasons. As you know, we're in the fall season right now. The MIAA has added an additional season, and what they will be doing is meeting and looking at information from the DESE and the DPH, and meeting about a month before a subsequent season actually begins to make a determination on whether or not they continue with sports, based on the trends across the state and trends in different communities. So still remains very, very busy. I want to thank those parents who have sent positive comments about the hybrid model and working well for the students. We know that that is not the case for everyone, and we regret that, but we've had lots and lots of positive comments, and so we thank you for your patience and for your understanding and the hard work that you're putting in. And that is all I have for tonight.
Carrie?
Sure. And just building off what the superintendent said, we couldn't be more proud of the staff who have this school year up and running, certainly the parents for their patience. We've mentioned that before. We have heard a lot of really, really great feedback, and we don't want our sharing this to take away from the people who are struggling. There are students who are at home during asynchronous times that have a hard time tending to school and their work in an independent sort of way with less structure than what they're used to. Part of it is that there's this reality of the hybrid model. We can't have all of our kids back at once, which means we have to have some of our kids home. And it is not ideal, but I think we're making a very difficult situation work well. Students are excited to come to school. Staff is thrilled to be connecting with students. And we have been asked from several parents who are saying, you know, things are going really well. When are you going to move into phase 2 of the hybrid model? Maybe extending to the full day in person. And I just kind of want to reiterate that we've really got to be patient in this process. Part of what we were doing was not only, with the half-day model, was not only to segue back into the school year, but for us, more importantly, in addition to the safety measures, it was to allow students to have face time with teachers every single day. And that's something that we really take pride in, and we do feel as though the asynchronous at-home times being not a full day, but only part of the day, is what is really helping people who are struggling with that time. And then in addition, we're fortunate that at this point, the superintendent and his committee don't have on their radar yet that schools have to be closed and we have to shift to remote. So every day we can keep these students in a model where there's in-person is a blessing. And what I would not want to do is expedite that process of potentially having more contact points, which could then lead to something where numbers begin to increase. So for every bit of time that we can have these students in, is precious time. So I think holding strong now, it's of course something, it's the agreement that we made with the WEA, with both parties very much on board with this model. And we think, relatively speaking, it's working well. We've had, back in September, there were a lot of technology tickets, help desk tickets. We had up to 100 per day, which, because of capacity, resulted in some families or staff members going 2 or even 3 days in some cases, few cases, with, while they were waiting on a response. And that's very frustrating when you're trying to access something from the schools. And our IT department worked feverishly. Julie Bedreau jumped in. The curriculum coordinators began taking on tickets. And now we are able to manage the tickets that come in today, are addressed today. So we're kind of over this initial hump. And as you can imagine, the volume is so much higher because not only does, every staff rely so very heavily on technology, but also the students and families at home are now given technology from K to 12. So I commend Mike Wells and his team also for just getting this done. And they were swimming in tickets and drowning on some days in tickets. So we're on top of that. I think that the principals have been very pleased about the process in schools and just the traveling in the hallways, the hand sanitizing, social distancing, wearing the masks. That's something that I think people started to get a little bit anxious about when they were planning in preparation for the students coming in, but really everybody is doing their part. There are certainly times, and Bill has sent something out to staff reminding them and principals reminding them that when students are on mask breaks, if they're outside, to make sure that they remain 6 feet apart. And with those additional reminders, we do feel like things are going very smoothly. And teachers are becoming very creative with how they are interacting with students. Teachers now, with some of their live synchronous students, are starting to do breakout groups and small group instruction with them, and that has been much better than having, a larger group on at one time. So teachers are starting to get a feel for what's working, what's not. So while we do feel proud of them, we do feel pleased with the model, I don't want to underestimate the amount of work that the staff and the teachers are putting into this, and quite frankly, they're entirely overwhelmed at the moment. And we sort of anticipated this, but a lot of the pieces we weren't able to anticipate because everything was so incredibly brand new. So we're doing everything we can to support the staff, and there are some additional pieces in place. We, at the elementary level in particular, they are not streaming, neither is most of the middle schools, but they're teaching all subjects, and so planning for the students in all subjects in front of them, as well as having to provide engaging activities, it's very, very time consuming, and we see emails coming in at midnight, on weekends, and we know that we just have to be able to find that balance of keeping students engaged at home, but making it manageable for teachers too. We just recently got all of our software apps up and running. It's something we wanted on the first day of school. Our data specialist is brand new and was given the task when he entered to help coordinate the pods. And we know how time-consuming that was. And then in addition, a lot of the software was new to him as well. So just having to orient himself. And I think that that will be very beneficial now that there's these apps that teachers can rely on, that's helping students, supporting students, advancing when students are getting prompts correct, and then scaling back and providing interventions as needed. The coordinators have been online and even Google Meets with parents, offering some additional support, and I feel like parents are in a decent place at this point with technology, and they know who to contact. We have a website, and Julie Bedreau is going to be sharing with parents that we now have Clever up and running. And Clever for the elementary level is a one-stop shop. They go to the little C that will be at the top of their Google page, which stands for Clever, and when they click on that, all of their apps are right there. So there doesn't have to be any toggling back and forth between the different programs that the teachers are using. So that's going to be helpful. Some other updates around the model. We did decide that we will be eliminating for this year midterm exams and final exams at the high school level. And those are the formal exams. It's not that tests or quizzes are being eliminated, just kind of those more formal pieces. The team at the high school had lengthy discussions about this and did feel as though it would be taking too much time out of the face-to-face sessions with students. And in addition, we were already looking at ways to try to address some of the anxiety that goes along with the midterms and the final exams. And this would be one way to not become a tipping point for these students, because we understand that during the pandemic, anxiety is at an all-time high. So we do know that we can assess students. We certainly want to be able to understand as teachers and as the school what they've learned, and tests will still be given. It's just not going to be the formal midterm and final exams. At this point, we are still scheduled to take MCAS. That may or may not change, but the most recent announcement is that we will be taking MCAS this spring. Other things that we still have not answered quite yet. Progress reports are coming out, if we were to stay on schedule, at the end of the month, toward the end of the month at Westford Academy. We started 2 weeks later. Students are in with their teachers every other week, so that's a discussion we're going to have. I know teachers are feeling a little bit anxious about having to produce something that captures a grade for students when we may not have as much tests that have been already completed by students. So that's something we're going to work on and just simply do what makes sense given the situation. We have in late November delayed opening for students because of the conferences with parents. So that's something we have to look at. If it's an early release day, which every day is, what does that mean for the delayed opening days? So that's discussion that is still kind of on the docket that we will bring back to you once we finalize and make a recommendation as to what that will look like. And then we're still waiting on guidance around the snow days. And then lastly, I just want to put a plug in for special education. Teachers and therapists have been working incredibly hard to provide students with the services that are on their IEPs that were written for a typical school day, and we are anything but typical right now. So they're prioritizing in-person services and certainly covering all of the meetings that they owe from the spring forward when they weren't able to meet during the shutdown. So they've got a lot on their plates too, but are working very hard and collaborating well with the teachers and with each other to provide the services that the students need.
I know school committee members may have questions pertaining to reopening, but I know we also have a reopening item on our agenda, so why don't we finish the informational updates? Ingrid, do you have an informational update that's separate from your agenda item?
The only thing that, thank you, sorry. The only thing, and we can wait until later because it does seg into, is unfortunately, or fortunately, we do need to start talking about the FY22 budget process. If that's all right with you all, we can kind of hit recap of 20, looking at 21, and then go into 22, if that's all right, or I can talk about it now.
I'm fine with rolling that together in the discussion later in the agenda, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, great. School committee update? Alicia?
So I have two. The first is that the Westford Special Education Parent Advisory Council will be holding a virtual coffee hour with Director Courtney Moran. That will be on Wednesday, October 21st at 7 p.m. And for more information, you can go to the Westford CPAC Facebook page, and there's an event link there for you. The second update is from the search committee. We met, I believe it was 2 weeks ago now, and we discussed options for a search firm. And thank you very much to Avery, who was still chair over the summer as that began, and for Ingrid for your feedback. The firms that we have reviewed, it looks like we are leaning in the direction of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, which has multiple benefits. Not only are they the least expensive, they also work directly with the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, and they have a very long history of being extremely open and effective, and they run a very good search process. What we did was, we did not vote specifically to approve them yet. We arranged a meeting, so this week, we will be meeting this Thursday. It'll be at 7:30 instead of 7, virtual meeting, and it's filed on the town page. And Dorothy Presser from the MASC will come in, and she'll be able to answer any questions we have about the process and what moving forward looks like, and help us get an idea of how we recruit stakeholders and things like that. So again, all those meetings are posted on the town webpage with the agenda, and the link for the remote meeting is on the agenda. That's it.
And that's Thursday night?
That is this Thursday at 7:30 PM. The agenda will be live tomorrow morning.
Okay, and that's back to school night at WA?
Yes. Unfortunately, Dorothy was not necessarily available any other day that week. Yeah, I know, it's tough. But there will be plenty of
Plenty of
public
options.
meetings going forward, and forums and surveys. You're going to get sick of us. So, thanks.
Sean?
Can I get into my update, or we good?
Oh, sure.
Perfect, okay. So, I know the superintendent briefly spoke about athletics and everything's resuming, and that's wonderful. In terms of viewing capabilities, we should have live streaming athletics starting Saturday
Nice.
through Westford Cat. Now, it's a work in progress, right? And this is a kudos to Jeff Bunyan, Steve, and Nick from Westford Cat, who are going to try to get this thing off the ground. But certainly Saturday is going to be a trial run. There's 5 or 6 games on Saturday. So it should start in the morning and go through the night, presuming that we don't have any issues with the live stream. But again, if the community could be patient with us, it's going to take some time to get this up and running. And the idea is that eventually, hopefully, we'll have this at future games too. Yeah, so it should be exciting.
Great. Awesome. Any other updates? Chris?
Policy subcommittee meeting, I think we're scheduled for this Friday at 9:30 in the morning, if that's okay with my fellow subcommittee members. We'll post that agenda tomorrow.
Avery?
Two that were already mentioned, I serve on the COVID subcommittee or advisory group. Amazing group of people that you've pulled together, the nurses, principals, public health. So I just want the public to understand that while we may not be sharing things yet, there is a very, very capable group looking at the numbers, looking at what metrics we need to consider on an ongoing basis. It is not just being overlooked. It is being scrutinized by a fantastic group of people. And I'm also the new chair of the Finance Subcommittee, and we've had 2 meetings, and we are hoping to continue to meet every other Monday morning at 8 a.m. Again, those will be posted through the town site, and I did see that there is you can go in and select Finance Subcommittee as an option.
Great. Any other committee updates or student updates? I believe we have our student representatives online. How are things going, Brian and Hannah?
No updates, but I would say I agree with Mrs. Cleary. Things in the school are going really good every day. The teachers improve on their teaching and like getting used to Google Classroom and the meets, and students are learning every day. Like, it's definitely like a struggle and stressful and different, but every day gets a little easier, and it's been like that for the past 2 weeks, so hopefully it stays on that track. But overall, yeah, pretty good in school.
Great. Hannah, anything to add to Brian's update?
I agree with everything you said. I think at the beginning it was really hard to get into a pattern, but I think now, with everything considered, people are doing a really good job, the teachers especially, so I think it's going well.
So Hannah, are you and Brian, are you both doing the hybrid model?
Yeah.
I'm seeing head, do either of you have friends who are doing the full remote learning academy, and do you know how their experience is going?
I do have some friends in the full remote academy. I can't like attest to how much they're like. I don't know if they're doing well or doing really bad, but they haven't said they're doing really bad, and they seem happy with it so far. But don't quote me on that.
Okay, well, we'll hope that no news is good news, and if you're
Yeah.
if you're a friend of Brian and you have feedback, let him know. I think I just put you on the hot seat, Brian. Any other questions for student reps? Okay, do we, and since I know this is always a work in progress, do we have any public comment that's come in over the Airtable? I've lost my connection to it
There are some,
briefly.
and you might need to refresh too to see the
Okay.
newest ones. There are some questions, but I think most of it's things that we're going to cover on reopening update. And so I think we should just keep an eye on those and make sure that we're covering those. Nobody is asked to ask a question live to the committee.
Okay, oh yeah, okay, mine's refreshing now.
So
Okay,
Gloria,
so,
Um,
yes, Ping Chen.
so last time we had actually one resident to be able to live join the meeting online. Now we switch over, ask them to join through Zoom, YouTube. Are residents still able to actually join the live discussion?
Yep.
And then actually join join online with us?
So the idea is it will work the same way as it has done in the past. If someone's on Zoom and they go to the Airtable and they say, I would like to make a comment, just like we had a guest speaker last time,
Okay.
then we can pass the mic on Zoom. But you do have to be logged into Zoom to make that work. We are also just letting people know if they're just watching and they're not trying to speak and interact with us live, they may have a better viewing and listening experience on the YouTube. So that's just why we wanted to give that extra option for people. We had a couple of residents who expressed some concerns since we're all masked and there were some more difficulties with the mics. We think, knock on wood, we've got a lot of that worked out. But if anybody's having difficulty hearing, they can switch over to YouTube. But yes, if they want to do a comment, they need to be logged into Zoom so that we can have them present.
Great.
Say that
great,
right,
yeah.
Chris? I think I
Yep,
did.
exactly
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
And just to let people know, we might go away from we might go towards, if we're still meeting in person, having everybody watching on YouTube or Westford Cat in coming meetings. And in which case, Airtable would still be the way you submit questions. If you want to ask a question live, we would send you a link to join our Zoom meeting just so you could ask that question. It's just because there's a lot of juggling. Audio isn't great the way we're funneling it into Zoom, and it simplifies a lot for us as well. So just something to be aware of that we may be transitioning that way. And the quality on Westford Cat and on YouTube is great. So, we might just move that direction.
So please be patient with us as work in progress. And if you do have feedback, if anyone does feel like they're having accessibility concerns, difficulty accessing this meeting, we do want to know that. We can't always know all of the accessibility concerns that are out there, but we absolutely want to hear about it, and we do want to make sure that our meetings are accessible to everyone in the viewing public. I guess then we're transitioning. I know we've got some questions, but it sounds like we're transitioning to reopening. Do you have other reopening updates before we launch into questions?
Well, I just want the parents and the staff to know that in the COVID Advisory Committee, we are looking at the balance between the need for confidentiality in accordance with HIPAA regulations, but also a responsibility to be transparent to parents and staff in terms of notifications. And so we're still working that out, conferring with the Health Department again this afternoon on that, and we will be coming up with some approach in terms of making sure that we are as transparent as possible, because that's very important during this pandemic. I do want people to know that every day I do look at the 30-day trend in hospitalizations, the Middlesex County trends, more specifically the Westford average daily incidence, the rate per 100,000 over the last 14 days, which is all in the DPS dashboard, total positivity tests and the percent positivity per 100,000. I keep a log of those sources of data. I'm waiting for the health department to present me with a age distribution of the cases in Westford. We talked about that in our advisory committee last week. I checked with the health department this morning. They had not yet had a chance to aggregate the numbers, but did promise within the next couple of days we'll get that, because I want to share that. I'm creating a dashboard for our website that will contain data that's generic enough, that will not allow any tracing of individuals that would be in non-compliance with HIPAA regulations. But it's important that the public have information, and we will be putting that on our system-wide website with a little bit of explanatory material with it, so that people should be able to know at every point in time where the state is, where Middlesex County is, and where Westford is in particular. And that is the only additional update I have.
Sorry, can you just clarify, like, when to expect a COVID dashboard?
That's part of it will be up this week, and it will be, I'd say, over the next week to week and a half that it will be completed.
Okay. Other questions from the committee, and then we'll also add in questions from the public. Chris?
So it's great to hear about the dashboard. I know that's something that a lot of people have been asking for, that data. And so just, the things, I don't know what will be on there, but I think certainly knowing positive case, how many positive cases, how many people have either quarantined or self-isolated because of possible contact, how many close contacts have been notified. I don't even know if it could even get to the point of students who have symptoms. How many students have reported symptoms and have either been tested or have self-isolated? But I think the most important thing, I know there's a lot of concern about metrics for switching over. When would we go remote? And I think, a single snapshot of data doesn't tell you a lot. I think it's the trends, and Gloria and I talked about this briefly earlier. For me, it's the trends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if we have 5 cases in the schools, is that bad? I don't,
Right.
maybe. It's bad, but I don't know how bad. But it's that day-to-day. We had 3 yesterday, we have 5 today, we have 12 tomorrow. That's bad, I know that. And so I know, again, for me, the trending is going to be the thing as a school committee member that I'm going to be looking at the most. And you touched on this a little bit earlier and in your video on Friday, which I thought was really helpful. When do we go back full in person? And it's tough, right? Without a vaccine or without cases, again, looking at that trend, without those cases going, or from camera view, going, on a trajectory towards 0, it's real tough when, if cases that are just sort of hovering or even increasing a little, going down. So I think seeing that data over time will help a lot.
And the dashboard will be updated weekly.
Okay.
And what the Department of Education has suggested also is that before any decisions are made to transition between teaching and learning models, we should view 3 to 4 weeks worth of, as you said, Chris, 3 to 4 weeks of trends, and not an isolated, week in particular. One of the things that I'm looking at carefully is, the incidence we know of cases is increasing in the state. 400, 500, 600, 700 per day in the last couple of weeks. And sometimes you'll look at the DPH website and numbers will change from day to day. And that's because labs report their data at different times. And so on one day it will say the number of confirmed new cases is 220. The next day for that same date it'll be 490. And that's because some of the labs were a little bit slower in reporting. The other data that I look at carefully is what's happening in town, but also what's happening in the schools. If we have 100 cases now, I'm just saying this hypothetically, if we have 100 cases in town, that may not involve any of our students or our staff, and so that's what we have to also look at carefully. And so there's a lot to it. We're going to try and be as thorough as possible and present as much information as possible to let people in town and our staff know what's happening.
Valerie?
I don't know if Alicia's in your blind spot.
That's okay, go ahead.
Are we populating that state spreadsheet that's been going around? Are we?
What's that?
The DESI, DESI looks like it's collecting all of the cases.
Yes, any person who tests positive, we need to report to the Department of Education. And they keep a database. It's actually public information. Anyone can access it.
Yeah, it's been shared on social media. We were shown as having 0 from 9/24 to 9/30, I think.
Yeah, and that is not correct.
Okay, so,
So that there are a couple of cases. And so I'm going to keep an eye on that, and we'll talk with our nurses about the reporting of that, because I know that in the spreadsheet that we maintain, Valerie, there is a indicator of whether or not DESE was notified, and in every case they were notified. So I'm not sure why they reflected 2 zeros there. So
okay. So we have someone that will work on that link?
yes, I'll ask Joan Mitchell to check with the DESE.
Thanks. And, sorry, just, I don't know if you want to round robin or just get them all out, but is any of the dashboard going to be school level, or?
It will start off being more district level. It will, my idea initially, and I'm open to comments, is to break it down by elementary, middle, and high school, and not necessarily by individual schools. But, we'll talk about that certainly in the COVID Advisory Committee, and I'll certainly accept your suggestions here. It's interesting because in the COVID Advisory Committee, there were some very strong feelings in 2 different camps in terms of not presenting notifications and the need to present notifications. And so it's very divided in many communities. So we just want to do what's right, what's responsible, and what meets, the HIPAA regulations also. But I do want to be as transparent as possible with the public and with staff.
Alicia?
So I think that actually dovetails nicely with my question. I'm glad to hear the dashboard is coming, and I'm glad to hear that there'll be, more metrics, more data for people. But we all know that there's been a social media post sharing a letter from another district that then people, Sherlock Holmes'd it and figured out that the district that the other district was talking about was us, and then social media exploded. And I understand we want to balance privacy concerns, but I also think there's something to be said for giving parents and staff enough information that we're not leaving them in a vacuum, because I think with lack of information, social media takes over and
I agree.
people are panicking. And no, we do not want to violate someone's privacy. I 100% don't want to do that. But I think we also need to balance that with the very real concern that there are parents who are hearing rumors. And if the rumor mill is not, if the rumor mill is never challenged by what information is coming out of the district, then the rumor mill takes over. And that, we don't want people there either. Because whether or not there is a concern or not, we do not want parents up at 2 o'clock in the morning wondering, do I send my kid to school tomorrow? We don't want staff panicking about, do I go to work tomorrow? So can you talk a little bit about where we are in the reporting process? What notifications would be going out? And I think that gets lost a lot in our conversations. At what point now will you find out if there's a positive case in your child's building? And how would you find that out?
Well, that is, first of all, reported primarily to the school nurse by a parent of a child who is symptomatic. Could be a child who is symptomatic at home or who has become symptomatic at school. In that case, they would go to the caring room and be dismissed to a parent as quickly as possible. So once a child is tested, or an adult for that fact, and tests positive, that information goes into the DPH database and comes back to the respective town. And so that's when the contact tracing begins between our health department and our school nurses. And once that's determined, in terms of who is a close contact and who is not a close contact, a notification will go out.
So how fast, I know that you can't predict when the parent would report to the school, and we have no control over how fast DPH works. But do you have a sense of how fast DPH would notify us? And I ask this because there are delays in people being able to get appointments with their doctors. The test has to come back. I don't think any of us are, necessarily finding rapid testing anywhere if we're just, testing our kids at their pediatrician's offices. So do you have a sense of how long it takes DPH to get back to us, and then how long it would take us to then notify the population?
Well, I think DPH gets back to the various towns right away, because they enter the information in.
Okay.
It's the testing date. That could be, a parent could be 4 or 5 days. It could be the very next day or the same day. So that's definitely a variable, Alicia. But as soon as that report comes back to the town, the health department immediately begins contact tracing with our school nurses.
Okay.
So I would love to say to you that it's within 1 or 2 days, but I can't say that in all honesty. It could be 1 or 2 days, could be 4 or 5 days.
It sounds like, we might have different levels of reporting and notification, right? Like, the dashboard, if it's weekly, is sort of aggregated data across the district, but it's not real time. It's not it's not as soon as we find out. In a case where there's actually an active case and we find out, there's maybe a next level, which is more of a push notification out to maybe it's a school. In this case, there was a positive case in the school. We just found out. We're contact tracing, where the person is quarantining, and then there's the next level, which is contact tracing, which is then you're giving more specific individualized information, which can't go out generally. But it sounds like those are kind of the 3 levels maybe of notification, and it lets you get things out in a timely manner to the people who need to know or feel like they need to know. And just again to reiterate what everybody said, more information is better. And look what happened in our nation's capital, where lack of information just makes us all speculate about what's really going on, and we don't want to do that, and we want to make sure. And I know there are HIPAA concerns, but I also know that that's been used to not give information, not here, but in cases where it doesn't need to be, and I think we should really be pushing up to whatever we can do, because I think it's the health and safety of our students and our staff.
I agree, Chris. I think, we'll do what's right for the parents and the staff and be as observant as possible of the HIPAA regulations.
You agree?
So with the COVID group that we're working, I think we are looking at a notification process we have to trust that the public health officials are doing their job, and you'll be contacted if you are a close contact. That's why we're doing the 6 feet, that's why we're doing the masks. So there's a little bit of faith in the public health system. That being said, I'm not looking to hide anything, but I do think that we need to be very careful as to how far down we drill in letting people know the information. We are looking at some letters that would identify a classroom and a school. And so those may be the levels that we're looking at notification that someone in your school has tested positive. And then maybe even a classroom level, depending on, I guess, if that's the notification we want. But we will be sending those kind of things out.
That's pretty far down. I mean, that's.
I know, and I get worried when it's down to the classroom level.
Classroom's a little trickier.
Well,
Yeah, I mean-
Is it personally identifiable? That's the question, right?
That's where I kind of get to
Yeah.
that point.
I seem to remember when my kids were in K-2 that there would be notifications if there were strep outbreaks. So there sort of is, there's a
Yep, there's
process already there.
Strep, lice, any of those.
And I know we don't necessarily notify for all of those things anymore, but, there are definitely ways. And if I could ask, please, when the dashboard first goes live, could you please send an email to all the parents just to let them know?
Yeah, push
Otherwise,
out.
they're going to be hitting refresh for the next 3 days, and I will be one of them, hitting refresh for the next 3 days.
Yeah, I will do a video on that, just to let them know, and let them know what information
Thank you.
is on there.
Mallory?
Sorry, just one more question on the COVID Advisory Committee. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Are there teachers on there?
Amy Noonan was at the first meeting. I'm not sure if she's going to continue in terms of time commitment, but we have, we have nurses, we have some of the administrators. I think Amy represents the Health and Safety Committee of the Westford Education Association. Avery, I don't recall us having any other.
No, and that was one of the things, I think, feedback-wise, that I think more teachers and maybe less administrative, because the teachers are the ones who are on those front lines. And so I do think that a little more representation from them could be a benefit to us as far as hearing and seeing what's happening. Not to say that the principals and some administrators don't have great points, but we have to deal with front lines
Right.
in this group, I think, a little more.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think in the original composition of the committee, I thought there were going to be at least two teachers, and I don't recall any administrators on it originally. So, I mean, it may have morphed depending on its
Yeah.
needs, and it may have morphed and changed a bit, but I would also want to make sure that we have that teacher representation,
Yeah.
because that's, as you said, the front lines. So let's
We will do that.
make sure that perspective's included. Other questions, or, I mean, I know there are on other topics, I'm sure, but on COVID exposure and notifications,
One-
I also want to get to some of the
One
public
question that
comments.
did come up at our COVID meeting was that we don't want to let fall off our buses. And an exposure on a bus route would also need some the close contact tracing, I'm sure, would catch a lot of it. And in general, I wanted to know how the busing was going, because I know it was kind of all over the place at the very beginning, and missed stops and different things but it was all, we were just going.
Yeah, and actually, the transportation has been going very well, and,
Yep. Better, good.
yeah, and the disinfecting of the buses between the runs is extremely efficient and going very well with the drivers. As you know, we provided them with the electrostatic hand and portable sprayers with a disinfectant that's certainly EPA approved. And I think you saw on the school tour demonstration, it really takes 2 or 3 minutes to do the disinfecting with a dry time of about 4 minutes. So that has gone very well, and the routes have gone very well so far.
Can I just, the thing that Gloria and I talked about, the state has guidance for their mobile response team in coming out if a school system is in trouble. And they deem trouble, they have it broken out, 2 or more students or staff within the classroom group, 3% of a cohort or grade, 3% of the school, 3 or more staff from the same school, or 2 or more students on a bus. So we have some basics there that the state has already laid out, and I think we're just going to kind of fine tune and focus in more on Westford.
Right.
Now, is
Trouble,
that?
what they call that?
Sorry.
I was saying, is trouble really what they call that? Did you say?
No. Oh, in
Word
trouble?
Yeah. what'd you say?
Oh, it just says that the mobile response team may be deployed,
Okay. Okay.
so
Deployment worthy.
deployed.
Let's
Do they
make it a
have
goal
any?
to not have that happen.
Yeah.
Yes,
please.
not have
Yes,
deployment.
please.
Make it a goal to not use that.
So you said they have guidelines for buses. Does the state have guidelines for what trouble looks like if we're talking about a special education van, which is a much closer area but a much smaller population?
They do not, they just said 2 or more students on the bus
On the bus.
develop COVID-19 within 14 days. So these are all on 2-week cycles.
Okay.
And as superintendent had said, most of the data that I've heard the state look at is make sure you look at 2 to 3 weeks of data. Don't take a single snapshot.
I heard
Ellie.
busing come up. I just wanted to know if the routes were being optimized at all yet, and if you've seen ridership increase as parents get more comfortable with schools opening and stuff.
I don't think we've seen ridership increase, Ingrid. And the bus company will always make a few changes here and there after the start of the school year in terms of some efficiency moves. I'll have to check with them to see what changes they have made. I wouldn't necessarily know that right now.
So this is kind of, we've now had 2 full weeks of each pod. So this week, actually, I spoke with our transportation manager this morning, and she's going to start looking at the routes to see if there's optimization. There are a couple of, unfortunately, as much as we tried to, create the pods with the neighborhoods based on scheduling and various family situations, we do have a couple outliers here and there. So we won't be fully optimized in that sense, but that is the goal, to look at that. Still keeping a certain amount of capacity, I think, is important as, to take into account if families do choose to switch model or move into the district, or just feel more comfortable taking the bus.
Yeah, I just personally know of a few families that realized that the pickup and drop-offs or logging in for a remote week and, was just,
Right.
too many pieces to the puzzle, and then was initially reluctant for buses, but then joined. So I didn't know if we had seen that go up or at all.
I think, a number of families also purchased the bus passes initially.
Okay.
And then drove, say, the first week. So
Okay.
I think we're still in that letting it settle phase.
Got it.
Jumping to some of the public questions we've had, and I think we've already touched on this, but maybe not gotten into specifics, and I don't know how much we can. But can you provide an update on current COVID exposure within the district and how it's been handled up till now? I know we've been talking about kind of how it's going to be handled going forward, but pending the release of this dashboard, do we have an update of where things stand currently for those who are watching tonight?
Yes, I do. Excuse me, I have that. If you have a,
Is it this one?
yes, there we go. Thank you. We, at the elementary level with students, we presently have 8 close contact cases. With elementary staff, we have no close contact, and we also, at the elementary level, have no current positive tests for either students or staff. At the middle school, we have 1 positive student. We have 3 close contacts. And with the middle school staff, we have no positive tests and no close contacts. With WA students, we have 1 student who's tested positive, 22 who are close contacts. WA staff, we have 1 staff member who's tested positive and 1 close contact. Thank you, Laura. Please know that, a lot of the close contact situations develop outside of the school environment. And so, the parents have been excellent in notifying us, notifying the school nurse, and so that's where most of those cases have emanated.
Bill? So in those, I don't know if 33 was the number I think I heard of close contacts across the district, are all of those individuals self-quarantining and getting tested before, it's either, right? It's either,
Yes.
well, you're self-quarantining and then getting tested
to
Yes,
return.
and even if the test is negative, oftentimes the school nurse and health department will recommend continuing to quarantine because the virus actually may be activated 4 or 5 days after, you know, the exposure, the last exposure to the person who was positive.
So I don't want to get into personal identifying information, but when you said that there was one positive middle school student but no staff close contacts, my brain goes, wait a minute, doesn't that student have a teacher? So I think that's probably where a lot of the questions will come from parents as well, is when we're looking at the chart of students who are positive, but then it says no teachers have been tested for close contact. Clearly, we don't want to say, well, that is this child, and that's why there's no close contacts. But I'm anticipating there will be some questions about that. I don't know how you're going to be able to field them. I'm just giving you a heads up. I anticipate there will be some questions because people will look at the numbers and they'll start to try to figure out what is what.
How do you jump from a positive student to a teacher being a close contact if we're maintaining 6 feet in the classroom?
To be frank,
Yep.
my child's one-on-one.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that this middle schooler is a one-on-one.
Right, but what I'm saying is those questions will arise, and I think that's, I'm not saying we have to have the answer to that. I'm saying
Okay.
those questions will come up because people will go through and start doing the math on whether or not all of these things line up.
But they're never going to line up because some of these
No,
could be
they're not.
impacted by outside of school.
Yep.
Or they could be on their at-home week. And if they're
That's correct.
diagnosed, you know, positive on a Thursday, then
So
the contact.
I think what I'm trying to get at then is when we explain the dashboard numbers and we explain that, maybe there's a paragraph in there that says that not every student tested positive while they were in the building. Some students may have tested positive outside of the building. I think an overabundance of information is better than allowing speculation to happen, because then we start to get people wondering who it is and trying to figure it out. So if we can preempt that with all of these factors may be in place in a little paragraph with that, I think that'll be helpful.
Okay.
And whoever's in charge of the Westford Health Department Facebook page has been great about that as a
Yes.
model, if we're looking for a model for that,
Yep.
right? They
Yes,
seem-
Jeff has been
yeah.
awesome, and
Oh, I
they,
didn't know who does it, but
there
yeah.
was a bit of a lag, but they just posted again today. There was an uptick in numbers, but there was an explanation, and I did reiterate that last week, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
your little blurbs are
Right.
so helpful
They are.
in just clarifying that it was due to parties and family gatherings, or, you know, it was a multiple household exposure, or whatever it was.
Right. Or even he'll say, I think it says sometimes like there's no
No
There's no
common.
link.
Common call, yeah.
And here's the thing, none of us have ever done this before, so I think there's a natural tendency to try and piece it all together. So, you know, I love those descriptions because they help me understand better how that all works. And I think in the absence of information, people will panic more, so.
But just because they don't all add up to X, Y, Z, doesn't mean that, you know, we've missed something or that
Absolutely.
something's
Because people
dropped
go
off.
home. I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's such
Yeah.
a fluid situation.
Right, right.
I feel like a lot of the comments and questions have been around the numbers and, you know, what might potentially, if there's an uptick, shift us into a fully remote situation. This parent is inquiring about the opposite. Thank you for the update regarding the complexity of in-person learning and to be patient. What we are not hearing is what is the data and criteria needed for us to be prepared to go back full-time? This has to be a data-driven approach and not just taking it day by day. Have we identified what data is going to drive the return to school full-time? If we don't have that understood and identified, when will we?
And that's fair.
The metrics will apply to both switching from hybrid to fully remote, but hybrid to full return also. One of the caveats that we need to deal with, though, is what are the directives from the DESE and from the CDC and the DPH about masks and social distancing? There is a capacity issue in our schools also, that we know with 6 feet of distancing, it is not possible to bring all of the students back. Even with 3 feet of social distancing, in some of the buildings, it's not possible to fit all of the students back. So that's a very, very important factor that we have to consider in all of this also. And I know I made comment on that on my video last Friday, and, I did receive a comment from a parent that, well, how will we ever return? And I said, well, we will return if there is a vaccine and distributed in large enough doses, and that at such time, the CDC, the DPH relax their distancing requirements and the mask requirements. So I think we still have a little ways to go. I have to be honest. It's nothing that's going to change immediately.
And as Carrie said, I think there's an in-between between hybrid and full return. It's the hybrid part 2, right, where they're full-day hybrid?
Well, the people were asking, making the assumption that that would be the next step. So we would have to weigh out if we feel as though that is appropriate. But like I said, one of the cornerstones of our model is that they have the face time with teachers every day, and we don't know that would be gaining enough to lose that very, I think, critical time for the kids who are home for a week.
And just a reminder too, even in the absence of a vaccine, the virus can peter out in an area if people are doing the right things, right? The prevalence of the virus can go to 0, in an area. So for those folks who are itching, for us to be able to go more fully in school, keep doing what everyone's doing. I mean, I think Massachusetts and Westford's doing a pretty good job, and just keep it up. That's the best. The vaccine's what they're saying, 50% effective, and these things are more effective than that. And so keep doing this, and we'll get there sooner than if we lapse and don't take it seriously.
You're absolutely correct. Every epidemiologist has stated that the masks, the distancing, and the hand washing are the 3 most vital components to reducing the incidence of the virus.
Absolutely.
The other piece of information I'd want to add and share is obviously any change is something that also impacts not only all of our families but all of our staff. So, and this is public information. This is one of our agreements with the union in our memorandums of understanding for reopening, is that if there was going to be a contemplated return to full in-time schooling, we are required as a district and committee to provide 45 days notice to the staff and the WEA, and that's a built-in 45-day period so that teachers could be able to make their own adjustments as they need for their personal lives, their child care needs, their family life. So, and of course, we understand other families and staff members would have to do that as well. So I don't want anyone, I guess, losing sleep or imagining that we will be, full back in school by Halloween. That's not physically possible with the calendar as it's been outlined. We have to have progress, evidence that numbers are declining, not increasing, and then we would have that 45-day built-in notice. So families do need to be prepared that this is going to be a long journey, and I think it's just fair to transparently acknowledge that, and I want families to be prepared for that. We're in this boat for a while, and I know there are things we're still working out, and we appreciate everybody's patience as that happens. Are there other
Gloria,
questions on this before I got some other topics here?
Just what you just said.
Yep.
45 calendar days or 45 business days? I can't remember.
Calendar.
Calendar days, okay.
45 calendar days.
Okay.
Along with hiccups, this parent is a frustrated parent who does want to share that they had, his family waited a week to get a response to an IT ticket, and in this case, His daughter's camera didn't work, which was critical in this environment. And so he feels like the rosy picture here was not fair and comported with his family's experience. And he also feels like teachers got 2 weeks of training, but parents and young students didn't get any training. So he feels like they need more support or information about how to use the equipment, what the expectations are. So what would kind of be the advice to a parent who is frustrated and is struggling and having difficulties? What would be the resources that you would suggest this parent turn to?
I would have to assume that based on the recent conversations with IT, that this might have been an earlier issue. We are not resolving tickets in a week, and that's the longest I had heard. I mean, I trust, but I think when we first opened, it was maybe an average of 2 to 3 days. That's what was shared with us, and if something went as long as this, I can't imagine how frustrating that is. So I assume that that is being resolved. The tickets are being distributed amongst many people now, from curriculum coordinators to Julie Bedreau, and then the IT department. We did, using the COVID funds, add additional IT support at the high school level through December 31st. And so I would still encourage people to use the ticket system, especially now feeling like we're on top of that. If there is some sort of delay, then contacting your child's principal would be the next step, because he or she would know where to go to get the answer quickly if it's something like this situation where students need it to access.
Yeah, I'll echo what Carrie said. I do feel like, I mean, school committee is always welcome to, and willing to hear feedback from the public, but there certainly are times that I feel like school committee will get a question that I think, this isn't a question for school committee, this is a question for your building principal. If you do have a specific concern about your child's specific experience and something they're struggling with, you're going to get the fastest answer by going directly to that classroom teacher and that building principal, because they're your first, line of defense. And that may be, and if you continue to have problems or struggles, or you want to share your experience with us, you're more than welcome to do so. But, I think it is fair to say that we can't always help with a specific concern. And your building principal may be the best resource for a problem like that.
Just to jump on that, that sounds like a hardware hiccup. But I have been hearing, especially kind of at that K-2 level, when the student, just can't troubleshoot themselves, and then maybe the parent is trying to help too, but then, maybe something is due for the afternoon meet, and then the teacher is trying to prep and get ready for the Google Meet and can't answer those real-time questions too. Is there, I don't know what that solution would look like, but are you seeing that kind of as an obstacle or a problem on a universal?
So you're saying during the asynchronous time, there's
Yes.
struggles with the
Right,
access?
so like this Jamboard isn't working this way, this link isn't working for me. It just feels almost cruel to be like, to the teacher, like, this isn't working, but this is due, and you're probably trying to eat your lunch in 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
then we're going to join a meet, and
So, and my advice in that situation would be email the teacher in the case that they're available, and it's a quick fix if it's something that they know. But even more than that, don't panic, don't do the activity, and when you're on with the teacher, the child can either explain, or the parent in the email. I wouldn't encourage a parent to hop online and start chatting with the teacher. That's a time with students. But some things just, if there's a hiccup, we all have to give each other grace, and that means the students too. We would never want a student in a panic situation, or a parent
Right.
scrambling because one of the technology pieces is not working.
I think it just feels a little different from the spring, because now we're talking about grades, right? And so that added pressure just feels a little different. And so trying to kind of work under that is where some of that's coming from, I think.
Well, and I can assure you that a situation like that would not give any sort of, have any detrimental effect on a report card because one of the technology pieces isn't working.
Okay.
So that's a good point to bring up, and you're right, stakes feel higher because we're
Right,
grading
right.
instead of just kind of a pass-fail. But that would not interfere with assessing what students know.
Okay, thanks.
That segues into another question I had. I have been hearing some horror stories from the college level about software that's being used to proctor exams or somehow police students during an exam. I know you had said that there isn't going to be the traditional midterms and finals, but are we using anything like that? I'm hoping the answer is no.
I would have to understand more what specifically you're
Okay.
talking about, but I think that the answer is no, based on that little description. We are, on Wednesday, particularly at the secondary level, talking about what does quizzes and exams look like, or tests. You know, there are things like Google Quiz, where if you're doing a more traditional type of assessment, then it does jumble up the numbers. So number one on your paper or assessment is different than the number one on mine, or even when they match, the order of the answers are different, just to try to control as much academic integrity as we can. So things like that would be used, but I'm assuming from what you're saying that that's not anything we're looking into at this time.
Yeah, this was literally software that was tracking the child's eye movements, and if they looked away from their screen to look around the room,
Oh.
that it could potentially be flagged as they were cheating, as if they were like looking to find an answer someplace else. And
Interesting.
that was creating a lot of anxiety.
Okay, I see. That is
certainly at
not
the
on
college
our
level.
radar.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Great. I think just, it will be super helpful as, you know, anxiety, I think, will go up now that we are in the graded context of just being very clear with students about what those expectations are and what to do if something does go awry. If you're in the middle of an exam and there's a technological problem, how does a student handle that or approach that? Like knowing that in advance. I know last spring with the AP exams, we saw you know, terrible problems where students were trying to submit their answers and weren't able to, and then weren't able to complete the exam. I guess I would just want to make sure that we're thinking through that in advance, so a student understands if something goes sideways during an exam and they lose time, that'll be adjusted accordingly. And like you said, there will be grace in understanding that we're all dealing with technological hiccups.
Yeah.
Great. Other questions? I think I caught everything on Airtable. If someone else on the committee sees anything, let me know, but I think I caught everything. Other
Nope, let them go.
other things?
I think
Sean?
there was one more, Bill, there was a question about air filtration, if you had an update on that.
I spoke with Paul Fox today, and the first order of MERV 13 filters was shipped on Friday, and so we're just waiting for that to arrive.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Anything else? Alicia?
Just, you talking about Wi-Fi going down, et cetera. I know that it has been concerns have been shared about the snow day issue, whether we'll have snow days or not. As the reopening and metrics committee is, you know, looking at all of these things, I've had several parents say to me, please don't forget that sometimes the tree streets have zero power and everyone else has power. Or sometimes Comcast will go down over near Robinson, but the rest of the town will be fine. And to reassure parents that we are not just looking at, did it snow and are we closed, that there are other issues that we understand need to be addressed. We're not just, it's not a binary open-close, that there will be, all of those things will be considered.
Right. Very much aware of that, Alicia.
Valerie?
I just wanted to talk a little bit more about staff workload. I really appreciated your, informational update where you really acknowledged the overwhelming amount of work that staff is feeling right now. I've reached out to a handful of people that I kind of talked to over the summer as we were debating reopening stuff, and I just really heard some really emotional stories about the amount of hours that are going into this prep time, the non-existent work-life balance. You know, people feel like, I've heard some anecdotes about, you know, families that feel like their families are getting their scraps. They can't look forward to the weekend, and just really unfortunate things. I mean, our staff is the foundation of why we're great. And I remember reading a lot about the social emotional aspect in the reopening plan about staff specifically. I know that was called out. And so I guess, and nobody that I talked to was complaining. These are all veteran teachers that were, you know, hard workers, not afraid to work hard, but this is like multiples of what is normal years. And sure, some of that's to be expected because everything is so different. I heard a couple specific, a couple specific things about maybe this particular model that they found challenging, about kind of multiple modes to plan for, right? The kids in person, the kids at home, how do you keep them engaged, right? And now, do I do something different for the afternoon meet? So I'm just really concerned about what we're doing to support them, and how to advocate for them, and just really looking for if there's a survey or what kind of things the administration is doing to help them feel heard and to help them give some flexibility or work on some adjustments, some fixes. Are we crowdsourcing some sort of solutions that they might have? If you could just talk to some of that some more.
Sure. Well, I have had a lot of face-to-face meetings with groups of teachers, and I'm assuming what you're talking about is primarily at the elementary level, based on how you described the model?
Yeah, that's my contact base right now.
Yeah, sure.
I'm open to anyone, but.
Right. So we have had lots of conversations. People have been emotional in those conversations to try to understand how we could best help. And first of all, everything that our teachers had been relying on previously that happened to be digital was removed from their repertoire for the first several weeks of school. So even under normal circumstances, they would have felt as though they would have felt that loss if we removed Seesaw, which is the platform, more K-2, but we use it K-5 for students to show their work. It's kind of how we're really interacting a lot with students and assigning work through Seesaw. Dreambox is the adaptive math software that we're using. Lexia, which we brought on once the pandemic hit last year, and that's wonderful, again, adaptable reading tools for students to be doing, and it's collecting data for teachers to help inform them. So under normal circumstances, removing all of those would be very difficult for teachers. Now, we have a situation where they are relying so heavily on the technology as, in some cases, the only way to teach students, right, who are at home. And they had to come up with activities and lessons that circumvented what they would normally be able to just offer using the technologies that we have available to them. So I do think that one of the major issues is that they didn't have the tools that they know and the tools that are part of our curriculum. And that has just recently changed as of late last week. Clever hasn't even fully been shared with parents yet because we wanted to make sure that we have something where parents aren't saying, oh my gosh, another way that we have to sign on, this is too confusing. And Julie Bedreau has a great kind of 1 or 2 pager that shows parents how to log on. We also have the coordinators who are now developing spelling lessons, comprehension lessons, writing lessons, gathering videos for the teachers to be able to use on that asynchronous week for students. So just more hands on deck with producing material that that's high quality that they can use. We do know that there are some teams who have divvied up, you do math, if we're all at fourth grade, for example, you do the math and then share with the rest of us. I'll do the ELA, you do the science, and so on, and then they share that way. And we want to provide additional opportunity and encourage the teams to be sharing that way too, so not everybody's reinventing the wheel. I mean, we've got, for example, at first grade, we have 15 individuals across the district. And if we can coordinate all 15 of them working together to create, they're all working on the same standards. Their pace is a little bit different because they adapt it based on the class and the students in front of them. But I think the amount of talent and brains and expertise we have in the district, we've got to find a way to better leverage those resources and in order to lighten the load while maintaining the quality. So that's kind of our goal. And I think it'll take time. I think it's still early. A survey is going out, is the 19th a Monday or a Friday, but that Friday, we want to give it a little more time. It's a what?
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday. So the Friday before, I believe, is when we're going to send out a survey to staff. We want the initial sort of hysteria to calm because people are adjusting, and like you said, that's inevitable, part of that. And we also want everything that we offer for a curriculum to be fully up and running, and that truthfully just started because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. So then they'll get a feel for what it's like when they have these additional resources that they're used to relying on. And then we are also crafting the November 3rd Professional Development Day as something where there's not this new training that they've got to participate in and learn something new. It's more collaborating to help work together to continue to develop additional units moving forward and do that in an organized way so that we are leveraging all of them so that people aren't feeling that rush to reinvent the wheel. So we do have things in place. Some pieces were out of our control, some are very much in our control, and all of which it feels like it's going in a very positive direction.
And so up until now, has the Wednesday afternoons been like a scheduled professional development? Are those going to be at some frequency? Because it sounded like that Wednesday afternoon would be really helpful for more planning time.
Right, and that's what we're giving them right now. So
Okay.
we're even saying through the month of October, we'll have some optional pieces. So this Wednesday, for example, Julie Bedreau is offering, which we trained in the first 2 weeks, a session on Clever. In the case that now that it's up and running and ready to go, somebody's like, I'm not really feeling comfortable and I want a refresher, they can go. And we'll continue to have optional offerings like that. But generally speaking, the Wednesdays through the month of October will definitely be just time for them to work together and to continue to create.
I just have two more quick follow-ups there. Of course, I lost them. Oh, I heard that there's a couple of staff members right at K level that are just the 0.6, right? Those would have been like the half-day. There's a couple, is that true? Sorry, there's a couple K teachers that are just 0.6, right?
Yes.
Okay, so they can't join, or they aren't paid for that professional development time or that team planning?
They are not. They are paid for the hours of teaching.
Class time.
They have planning time as well, but if you're talking about the full day, they are not in for full days.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, a couple of people that I did talk to were K teachers, and it's just interesting to think of that 0.4 interventionist services hasn't started yet, right? So they feel like they're overwhelmed and, trying to stay afloat, but this kind of third job, hasn't even started yet. So I'd really be interested to stay updated on how that goes, and what kind of supports we're offering to keep our staff supported. Thanks.
Happy to do that.
Okay, Thank you for all the updates and information. I think before it gets too much later and we lose an ability to comprehend numbers, we should move on to fiscal updates.
Absolutely.
So it is late, so I'm going to go as high level, and then based on your questions, drill down, if that's all right. You've had this report, I think, now for a number of weeks, because we haven't been able to get to it. Understandably, 2020 seems further and further away. I tried to, use this not only, I started again, just reminding for perpetuity that, we were in COVID, to set that stage, because this is a very different financial year end than we obviously would normally have. We were successful in, as I've said before, going with the plan of trying to preserve as much of the revolving funds and funds that we can carry into FY21 as we could. I think with the town's blessing, we were able to take our closing balance of the $92,033.79 and put it into the Special Education Reserve Fund, which, we haven't had those funds in past years to really dedicate. And hopefully we don't need them right away this year, that we can carry on to 22, which I think will be equally challenging, if not more. In some ways, unfortunately, closing the schools did save us money. I think we'd all hate that statement as much as I do, even though you probably don't always believe that. But,
If we close for
we would much rather spend our full budget and have every kid seated in their classroom, being educated in the best way possible. So, special education, that was a big one that we talked a lot about this winter. And circuit breaker, I think everyone is very well versed now, hopefully, on what circuit breaker is and how we use it. And we were able to keep all of the circuit breaker that we expect to use, receive this year, to use next year. And then same last year's circuit breaker that we received we have to use it this year, but that full amount is available for us to offset our special education costs, which, like I said, we've had plenty of conversations about that in the past, but I really think, that was a big one that will help us this year, particularly with so many uncertainty. And as much as we, project, I, in the back of my head still have the worry that, there are costs we haven't even thought of yet. That there's just, with this pandemic, that I think, we've all learned new terms this year. I think I wasn't even really clear what asynchronous was before this summer, so. So like I said, I'm happy to, I did last week answer some of the questions. I think I don't know when they were distributed that you had submitted. I can go over those verbally just so that the public can hear those answers, or if they're specific ones. So that was really high level. I'm happy to back up and go into this a little more, but it is late, and I do think it is important for us to discuss FY21. So any questions on 20 before we move on?
I know I was able to address my questions at the Finance Subcommittee. I know some other committee members were able to submit some via email. So barring any other questions, we can
Great.
move along.
I just wanted to thank you for
Yeah.
the document questions. That was really helpful
Oh,
for
good.
someone learning it.
Yeah, no, I'm always happy to answer them, so. And I think in some ways it was probably good that you all had some weeks to look at this, because things gel and different things pop up, so. So I'm always happy to answer more questions. So I'm cheating a little. I did just reuse the presentation that Bill and I used at the Select Board School Committee, Finance Committee meeting, but, why reinvent things? Which, does talk a little bit about the high level of our, the funds that we have available, the CARES funds. I will direct you to, I think it's page 3 and 4, that outlines a little the different qualified expenses that we can offset. It's different, and each, there are different things that qualify in this bucket versus that bucket. And I've been working very closely with Dan O'Donnell. We had a call last week with the state that elaborated a little more about the municipal funds that are available. We're entering round 2. As we talked about a little bit at the Finance Subcommittee this morning, round 2 of the CARES funds that are administered through the town, it's the same dollar amount, so it's still the 2 million, sorry, I should know it by heart now, but the $2.142 million. But we really, as a town, did not submit that many expenses in round 1. I believe it's just shy of 200,000. That mostly covered PPE, first responder, overtime. But we're very fortunate as a community that, we have not been as hard hit with the virus, that we have needed these funds to really offer some of the care for the community and our staff that other communities are facing. So we are working, so round 2 means that we will take qualified expenses from July 1st to September 30th to apply for reimbursement, and then have to project out what through December 30th, they keep emphasizing it's not 31st, it's the 30th. Not sure everyone's going to celebrate on New Year's Eve, I guess. But we have to spend and have received anything that we buy or any service that we have contracted by that date, as of now.
So like air filters have to be in our possession by December 30th?
Yep. On December 29th, we can't just go and, hit click and order.
Okay.
So that's really important. I think they do allow transit time. I mean, you could say, well, it's on a truck somewhere, but, it's not, 11th hour spending is not going to be allowed or reimbursed then. So we absolutely do not want to be in that situation. There is, part of the call Dan and I were on last week, there is the possibility that that deadline is moved. That would take an act of Congress. So if the deadline's moved, obviously we will continue to have certain expenses in January forward, as I tried to outline here a little bit. And but you have to weigh it. Do you reserve a certain amount in hopes that that deadline is extended, or do we expend the funds to try and set us up as best possible to move into the next year? So we're working together very closely with the town on that. One of the large drivers, well, there, in my mind, 2 large drivers. We as a community are pretty well set up right now with PPE. We were cautioned that they really only want to you to keep a 60-day supply. So we're not supposed to go and buy 5 years worth of PPE now. And to prove that, we're constantly replenishing, that we're not stockpiling. Which we wouldn't want to do for, I think, moral reasons either. Air quality and HVAC is a big category that we as a community in Westford, have identified that we have some areas that really can improve. All the MERV 13s, another term I think we're all newly familiar with perhaps. The air filters that we're putting in the more enclosed classrooms, plexiglass, all these things are things that qualify. Also just contracting out for repair and services to make sure our equipment, particularly as we move into winter, is as optimal as possible to help ensure that, you know, we're providing our staff and students with the best air quality that we possibly can. And then on the other, another category are additional special education services that our students may need. I know Courtney's team is working diligently and as quickly as possible to identify students that, you know, need extra support. And she's already put certain things in place that will be eligible because those are non-budgeted, which is a key here. You know, we can't replace our budget, things that we'd already planned to spend. It's, you know, in addition to and directly linked to COVID-19. Special education transportation too is going to be one that we're going to seek for, reimbursement through December 30th or whenever school breaks for the winter break, because we've lost a great amount of capacity there, whereas in the past we could fill a van, now 2 to 3 students, so we've really had to increase the capacity, and that's going to be an expense that obviously is directly linked to COVID-19. And then on the one of the other buckets is also CARES funds that are administered through the Department of Education. And again, those have slightly different qualified expenses that we can spend the money on. There we can hit a little more for the incremental staff costs that we're going to be facing, some of the leaves. Again, we do have in the budget, you know, long-term substitutes for leaves that one could anticipate we'd have, you know, maternity leaves, health, non-COVID related health. But we, as you know, have a number of staff that for childcare, health reasons, have taken leaves, and we have definitely, everyone's worked really hard to cobble together enough coverage of great qualified teachers. So those costs are extra monitors when we can hire them. That's been a challenge. Carrie referenced earlier the technology support that we were able to provide at the high school. All those are qualified expenses that we can use. The 1.057 million that's administered through the Department of Education. And then there's January, which, again, we don't know if we're just cut loose then, and we don't know what our schools are going to look like. Are we going to be able to remain open? Will we have to step back and have some closure period? Some of these costs will not go away. And that's why, you know, all those discussions about preserving funds and circuit breaker and all that is so critical, school choice, to try and get through the end of the year while still looking at a pretty grim right now FY22. So unfortunately, I wish I had great happy news. But I think we're in this for the long haul. We're just going to have to really be honest about, you know, what we're facing and work together to solve these issues. I think, you know, I'm going to keep going for a second, and then I'll be happy to answer questions about the 21. But, you know, as we do move towards 22, we've had school for 2.5 weeks. It's hard to imagine what next September will look like even. And so after I answer your questions about 21, I would like to just have a brief discussion about the budget process into 22. There have been some discussions on the town side and just how we fit in and how it would be most effective, I think, to craft a realistic FY22 budget, which I really think is important that it is as realistic as possible and not just, I mean, I don't want to sound flippant, you know, we could make up a budget right now, but would it hold to next September? I really doubt it. So I think the more data points that we have and the time to see where we are, and obviously when town meeting is scheduled, will allow us to have a more realistic budget process. So, but I will back up to, again, the CARES funds and FY21, you know, the schools have been great about identifying, you know, what they need without overspending. Everyone is still in the, we know money is tight mind frame, and I am very appreciative to work with so many people that are looking for creative solutions and, you know, are very cognizant of money is not growing on trees, even though when you see the dollar amounts coming from the federal government, it's a lot of money, but this virus has really caused a lot of expenses, and we want everyone to be as safe as possible.
Thank you for all that information. I know, again, I was able to ask some of my specific questions at Finance Subcommittee. I guess my high-level comment is really just to be grateful for all the work that went into closing out FY20 in such a way that really enabled us to retain that circuit breaker funds, really retain as much as possible in our revolving accounts to really leverage ourselves into this very difficult, challenging year in FY21. We'll hold off concerns about FY22 for a minute. We'll get there. But other comments, questions pertaining to where we are with FY21 and the CARES Act. I think the other thing I'd add to echo Ingrid's comments is all of the improvements with the HVAC and all of the improvements and upgrades that have been made there. I don't know how we would have paid for those without the CARES Act funding. So I think I'm very grateful that that we did have that funding available and would convey that thanks to our legislators. Having a continuation of it into the following year would be nice too, but we'll get there. Other comments, questions about FY21 before we talk about 22? Okay.
I should do these updates late all the time.
Well, we kind of had a couple of pre-ones because we.
Well, I do feel, yes.
We did
you've
talk
heard
about this at
the
a
boards
joint
and-
meeting with
Yes.
Board of Selectmen. If anyone wants to rewatch that on Westford Cat, there's more detail there.
Yeah.
We've also discussed it along the way a couple times, but it's good to have it high-level reviewed again. We all need to be staying on top of it this year. So the domino into FY22.
So the domino into FY22, and this is where actually we would like to have some feedback, is a number of select board meetings ago, there was some discussion to permanently change town meeting back to further in the spring, May perhaps, as it was, when they changed it, 12 years ago, maybe? I remember all those committees, so it doesn't seem that long ago, but I believe it was about 12 years. And so the select board decided not at this special town meeting, they weren't willing or ready or didn't think it was the appropriate venue necessarily to have that conversation right now. Based on some more informal conversations with the town, and I believe Gloria's spoken some with other boards, that the consensus is that it's highly unlikely that we will have a indoor March town meeting, I would guess, wager, it's also highly unlikely that we'll have an outdoor March town meeting. So I think, that said, right now, kind of the normal budget process is beginning. And until the town meeting is set, and we have that as the anchor, because really everything we do in the budget process is based on when that meeting is, and you work backwards. And as you all know, there are many, many meetings, many, many questions, many forums, lots of work that goes into the budgets from the community, staff, town, school, everyone. So if you would so choose, it would be great if the select board could hear some of the feedback from the school department and the school committee of when a annual town meeting might be best scheduled. And unfortunately, that has to really, I think, that feedback needs to come sooner than later.
No, it's fine. We believe, according to Christina from the Finance Committee meeting this morning, the town meeting should be on the Select Board agenda for next Tuesday. So we want to make sure that we are reaching out. Just as a follow-up, because Ingrid got us as this new finance group, and the first thing we want to do is create a budget timeline so that we all know where we are. But as Ingrid said, you have to be able to start at town meeting and work and push backwards. So this will be a very important number or date to set. Right now, it looks like it's tentatively May 8th.
That's when it was traditional.
That would have been traditional, okay.
That's not based on really a whole lot of, except me.
The other thing that Ingrid is going to be looking for from us and through the Finance Subcommittee are budget directives. So what are our hopes and dreams and goals for '22 and beyond? And how do we envision funding them, or that's your job?
Well, no, I think, a budget directive, many other school committees do have that. The budget does fall under, the school committee has a big piece of that as your charge. So when the superintendent puts together the budget, I think having, some high-level, again, I think as Avery put it, hopes and dreams. I don't know if we can fund hopes and dreams this year or next year, but I think to try and mitigate some of the angst that maybe came out in the past budget cycle, that, just as a kind of first step to get everyone on the same page, maybe.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
Get ahead of it now.
a question about, I was in the meeting when the select board decided that they didn't necessarily think they should move the meeting permanently this year. So what is it they're going to discuss next week? Is it going to be a temporary movement for
Yes.
just this year?
So
Okay.
to permanently move town meeting, that's a charter change, so that
Right.
would be a vote of town meeting.
Okay.
To move the town meeting just 1 year, within the year,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in a pandemic, which also has loosened up some of the restrictions, the select board have that authority to set the date.
Okay.
And I think the key question there is just, when is that decision made? Since everything does kind of, as Ingrid explained, domino from that date, if we know now that town meeting will be in May, that gives us a little more breathing room to develop this timeline, develop new budget directives, have some of those preliminary conversations, instead of having to dive into the cold water of the process if there's still a possibility the town meeting might actually happen in March. So we want to operate under the assumption that it would be happening in March. If we know we have that extra time and space, we want to use it wisely.
Right.
We want to take advantage of that time to really prepare for budget season.
We're
But-
looking at an 8-week
Right.
adjustment in the calendar.
And we also don't want to be in a position where our process is in any way out of sync with the other town departments.
Right.
So
We don't
I
wanna
think,
hinder their process
Right, so I think if we
Exactly.
could all get on kind of the same page, I think it would really make for a better process all around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we want to vote to, like, get the will of the committee?
I think what we would be looking for really is a consensus. I don't know if it's a resolution or a formal vote, or if it's really just a consensus this evening, especially since I don't know, given the Monday holiday, whether we'll be meeting again. We might be meeting jointly with the select board on the 13th, but if we can just have the discussion here, and if I can just hear everyone's thoughts, I don't know that we necessarily need a formal vote, because I don't have a resolution.
And then I think it would be
present.
great if, again, you all so choose, that, any conclusion might be formalized in a memo from Bill and Gloria, perhaps, that we could include in the packet, for the select board and that discussion on, that they plan on having.
We are supposed to be with them next week to do the joint DEI appointment.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
But I think if we
Then we
could
go
send a
into our
memo-
meeting, right after that?
We haven't figured that out yet.
We have to figure that out at agenda setting this week.
Yeah.
So,
Because they may be talking about this next
Right.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
right, so I think
Yeah,
we
I
still
mean,
need
it
to figure
would
that out.
be probably good to have at least some school presence if that
Yep.
topic is discussed.
Right.
Well, I certainly don't have any reservations about such a move, and I think you've laid out pretty clearly the benefits, and I don't see any major drawbacks from a school point of view.
Yeah, I would support a May or June, depending. Last year it was June, and I think that got more troublesome with what needed to happen, but this whole year has been, I think to move it back to the traditional May would greatly benefit the school budget process.
Yeah, I certainly just think we can make a better assessment of what our needs are. I mean, we're
Especially with our late start this year.
we're really getting squeezed with the school year starting later than normal. So I think we can make better assessments and have better data going around.
I think it's a great idea.
Seeing head nods?
Yep.
Okay, I think that is looking like a strong head nod, unanimous consent from that side of the room. Okay, so we'll prepare that statement on behalf of the committee and really voice our support for, even though if they're not ready to make a permanent move, that's totally fine. But the sooner we know if we would be making a move this year to have town meeting later, that would really help inform our budget process.
Thank you. I truly think we'll have a better budget.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
And
And I think I'm quiet for a moment.
maybe not.
Oh, we got to do
Nope.
warrant.
Because that segues nicely into a special town meeting.
But I don't-
For anybody watching at home that hasn't heard yet, special town meeting will be taking place on Saturday, October 17th at, did they maybe move it back to 9?
9
9
a.m.
a.m.
9 o'clock, yeah.
9 a.m. on the Westford Academy Trustees Field. The select board always traditionally weighs in on the various articles and publishes their recommendations to town meeting. Finance Committee weighs in on numerous articles, but not necessarily all. In the past, sometimes School Committee has officially weighed in advance. Sometimes School Committee has weighed in live on town meeting floor and has taken a vote on town meeting floor, and other times there are articles that we don't take a position on. So we do have various options before us. I know it has been suggested that we might want to take a position on certain parts of Article 5, parts of which relate to the Community Preservation Committee recommendations, Article 6, which relates to capital appropriations. We had a resident request about whether or not we would like to voice an opinion on Article 11, Indigenous Peoples' Day, and there was also a suggestion that we might want to weigh in on the citizens petition, Article 26, regarding the disposition of 63 Main Street. So,
We have not been asked by select board or town moderator to officially vote on anything.
We don't have to.
Okay.
It is at the option and pleasure of the committee. So, given the hour and the topics, what is the pleasure of the committee? Would we like to engage in a discussion of these warrant articles and potentially take any votes this evening? Would we like to potentially save those votes for town meeting floor? If that is helpful, what is the pleasure of the committee?
Given that we haven't actually officially been asked to weigh in on anything, however, we have the pending amenities building and the waivers from the state that have run out, and we are down to the wire on this. My personal feeling is I would like to see us support Article 5, take a vote on Article 5 tonight that says that we support it so that we can move forward on this, because we are really at the tipping point here. We're going to stop being able to use that building. We do not have any waivers left. This needs to move forward. So I think whether or not we discuss anything else from the floor, the citizens petitions, I feel like maybe that's a discussion for the floor, but I think Article 5, most definitely, we should take a vote tonight to support. I would take a vote tonight to support, because we've already been here once and it failed, and we are at the end of the runway. We have to do something.
Are you making an official motion?
I would like to move that the school committee support Article 5 to approve community preservation recommendations, specifically those to fund the amenity building at the WA track, amenities building at the WA track.
Second.
Any
So
discussion?
that's the one which was defeated in the town meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
and CPC is bringing it back around, and they have more arguments to be made, I think.
Oh, okay.
And they're presenting.
They're presenting. And the gist of the presentation, my understanding is, if we don't do this, we are either going to have to take the money from somewhere else and lose those things,
Right.
or we're going to have to stop using the building. One of those two things is going to happen.
The financial piece that's going to be.
Yes.
Right, and I just for your reference, before you entertain this motion, the Board of Select, or the Community Preservation Committee voted unanimously to support this project, as did the Select Board and the Finance Committee, using community preservation funds.
Question?
Yes.
Will our vote get printed in the motion book?
They
Historically, it
don't-
has
they
not.
can't, well, in the past, there have been, certain school
It's not
committee
already
articles.
printed?
Yeah, I think sometimes it has been in the past.
Like,
I
whose
honestly
discretion
just
is
don't
up
know
in- is
when
up to
they're
town clerk's
printing
discretion?
It's town,
deadlines.
yeah, it's the town.
Because obviously some things are more relevant than others,
Right.
and
Right.
we could take votes on motions all day, and some of them would be like, well, nobody cares, nobody asked you. So-
We could ask.
I think you could ask, yeah.
I think it's really, I think sometimes it's a question of when we make a vote and when it goes to print. 'Cause I
Usually-
think sometimes it has been in printed in the books, and other times it hasn't. It may just be a matter of timing, but we can
So,
certainly check with them.
and boards aren't necessarily solicited always for their input. It's, really timing. Did a committee meet before in order to capture it in, on the motions document? I can't imagine actually that all the documents have been printed yet, just we still are 2 weeks out, and we do print these in-house. So we could ask, if you would like, that. It does help the public to see
Yeah.
who
I think for
has
this one
weighed in.
especially.
And
Yes.
usually, on the motions document, as you can see, it'll say, which board and the vote, 5-0 or 7-0.
Well, and I think particularly on this article, because it was a source of confusion at last summer, should we call it? Last spring's town meeting. It felt like summer. And because it is such a critical need at Westford Academy, I think it does make sense for us to take a position and a strong positive statement of support for this one. So are there any other questions before we call for a vote? Because we've got a motion on the table.
Was there a second to that?
Yeah, Avery
Oh,
second.
Avery, okay.
Okay. If that is the case, all in favor of motion to voice school committee support for Article 5?
Unanimous.
Thank you for
That
that
is unanimous.
support.
That is unanimous. I would think one of the corollaries to that is kind of some of the other possibilities that if potentially that article does fail, there is a placeholder in Article 6. I believe it's, is it Article 6, Motion 4, the fourth motion in Article 6. And, I mean, this gets a tad technical, but if by chance Article 5 fails, one of the alternate plans is to fund the Westford Academy amenities building through a capital debt exclusion, and that is what is shown in Article 6, the fourth motion. I believe, if I have this correct, that the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee did not recommend that motion because those boards recommend Article 5. So they're, at the moment, they are not recommending that fourth motion, but obviously if Article 5 failed, they might take a vote on town meeting floor. There might be a caucus between boards at that time, and there might be revoting. I don't know if we would like to follow suit and take a similar vote in line with what the other boards have done.
If I could just to make sure everyone's clear too what a capital debt exclusion is. So that would require a 2/3 majority vote at town meeting and then a subsequent ballot question. We wouldn't have time to be on the November ballot, so it would either be waiting until, I believe the next scheduled election would be in May, or we would have to call a special election, just, so some people, it's not the right term, but they use the word override, it's the same idea, except for a capital debt exclusion. Once you pay off the full amount, then it goes away, unlike an override which lives on.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
It certainly would be a complicated process, and while I'm calling it an alternative, it is not an appealing alternative, given the critical need for this building.
Would you like a motion to support what the select board and the finance committee and not recommending it, only recommending it if CPA funds fail?
I think
I would say that we don't have to actually take any action now. We will wait until town meeting on this one, because you don't want to actually spend time talking about this if like we don't need to do this.
Yep.
I think it's at the board's preference, whether we want to just be in line with what the other boards did and explicitly not recommend it. I mean, they really need to take a statement on everyone. We're not required to do so, so we could,
According to this copy, select board
we could
does
hold-
not have a vote on it, only FinCom
They-
does.
I think this is delayed. This doesn't have all their
The
updates.
latest one
Totally
was
did.
select board.
Yeah.
I believe, if I'm correct, I
They
believe
took a, yeah, they
they made a
voted.
unanimous vote
vote
to
to
not
not
recommend this.
Yes.
So they followed suit with FinCom on this. So I think it's, at the board's discretion whether we want to officially take a vote on that or wait until town meeting and we see what happens with Article 5.
And just for your information, we've already had a few meetings, so Jim Antonelli and Paul Fox and I have been meeting. We're bringing in Tom Mahana from the Permanent Town Building Committee to have all our ducks in a row to be able to answer all questions and help with the presentation.
Great.
Personally, I
So-
support the idea of a united front from all the boards. This is not the road we want to go down. It has, greater impacts and concerns. So in solidarity with the other boards, how would we want to word that? Does anyone else?
I think if,
To not recommend, just like they did.
yes, it
Okay.
would, yep.
So then I would
So-
make a motion.
So if we say we're not going to recommend, and then if the other one failed, and then we have to go back to this, then how do we present to the public? Say,
Just like everybody
Yeah.
else, they're gonna re-caucus on the field
Yeah.
and decide that
do you have to?
that's number 2
Okay.
response.
So basically, we say, hey, we took a vote, don't recommend, but now we change our mind.
Correct.
So then why do we need to vote now?
The reason I think that they did it is they're trying to suggest that this is the not recommended way of funding it. We really want to fund it through Article 5. We think that's the appropriate way. and that by approving this, they felt like it would suggest they were two equal options, and they don't view them as two equal options, and I don't think our board does either. The preference would be to fund the WA amenities building through Article 5 CPC funds, as recommended by the CPC committee and all the other boards unanimously. And if that then failed, we might change our position on Article 6, fourth motion. But at the moment, we don't recommend that because we don't want to go forward with a debt exclusion. That is not the preferred method of funding it. So I think that's the reason for making the statement. So,
And I would say there's always the possibility that articles get taken out of order on the town floor. We would like to hope that that would not happen in this case. However, making our position clear now, it just clarifies that we stand with the rest of the boards in.
Did you make a motion?
Will make a motion that the school committee not recommend Article 6, Motion 4 in the town warrant.
Support.
Does not support Article 6, motion, fourth motion.
and if I could add a friendly amendment to that.
Please.
For the stated reason that our board recommends funding using CPA funds in Article 5. That's
Friendly motion,
the
absolutely
caveat
accepted.
that both the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee voted under. So I think we could do the same. Second. And all in favor? Unanimous.
The other one that's an obvious sore thumb that's sticking out is Article 6.
Yep.
In supporting the school administrative office feasibility study. We should note that the FinCom has not recommended it, 6-2. They don't feel, they'd like to talk about putting it in with other considerations at a future date, like revisiting 51 Main Street and what's in that, and the construction of that building, and potentially the rec department. The fact is, at some point, we need a school administration building, and we know that that process takes several years. And it really is it would become in the hands of the Permanent Town Building Committee. It's not really in our hands. But I do think if we took a vote to support that, it just says, we need to start this process somewhere. I know that financially it's not a great time, and I think FinCom argued that it could be pushed off with some of the other things that I'd already mentioned. But I think we need at some point to just draw the line in the sand and say, look, we need to at least start the process. I know that we've done a little bit of work in looking at some options. I'm more inclined to support this than even go down whether to touch 63 Main, because that it needs to be the will of the people, and we need to consider that we need an office. It doesn't have to be 63 Main. 63 Main doesn't even have to be in the running, but we need to start looking at an option.
So I would agree, and I would also further make the argument that as expensive as this study may be, it's going to be more expensive if this building suddenly becomes unusable. And this building is rapidly approaching the end of its lifespan, and that is entirely a possibility.
And it's
So
2020.
So
it's 2020, so.
it's funny that you say that, so excuse me.
Yes, please.
Just because I had to, in closing out the year, and the auditors were in the last 2 weeks, part of just the closeout from the town, and as a department, they came here too. We have to, I have to go through the whole fixed assets schedule, and this building's on there, and it is fully amortized and has zero value now.
Zero value.
Well,
I just
it's
say
going to be a
that's-
cost sooner rather than later.
That's a very important point, Alicia. One we made with the Finance Committee also, the more we get ourselves into an emergency situation, the far more costly it becomes.
We don't want another town farm or
That's
town
correct.
hall.
Town hall,
Or any of the
yeah.
other situations
Exactly.
that we've run into.
Well, and this feasibility study would, that would be, the Permanent Town Building Committee would contract it out to a design firm or, people who do this for a living. So this would be professionally done and looking at, all the needs and that could include some of the other town departments that we share.
Absolutely.
Gloria, John Cunningham from FinCom would like to speak.
Okay,
Is that okay with you?
sure. Can we make that technologically possible? So
Sure as heck try.
John can speak to us. While we're trying to make that technologically possible, I'll just share my view that I think it is important for us to take a position on the Article 6 capital appropriation. It's very important that this process start. We know that the functional life of this building is short. Don't say 2020. And it's vitally important that we get this process moving. If 63 Main continues to be owned by the town, I think, of course, we would want that property evaluated as a possibility along with all the other possibilities. And that would be at the discretion and expertise of Public Town Building Committee. But if the town no longer owns that property, then we will look at alternate properties. I think we can separate off for a second and we can discuss afterwards whether we should take a position on that citizen's petition. But I think we absolutely need to take a position on Article 6, and I would be strongly in favor of that.
Is John able to join us yet?
I think he's on. John, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Yeah, just for your information, on that Article 17 for voting for the town meeting in May, the Board of Selectmen voted 5-0 to remove that from the warrant.
Yep, and we,
Go ahead.
sorry, John, I can't hear you. Was there an additional comment?
Well, yeah, I just, and then on the other stuff, you're absolutely right. The Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen voted to, to support I think it was the Community Preservation Committee funding. And then we did vote no on the other, but we plan to re-vote if that's defeated.
Okay, great.
So we support that project all the way, and we'll be willing to speak to that when we have the special town meeting.
Great, excellent. Thank you for the information and for your support, John. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
And thanks
no
for joining us.
I've enjoyed your meeting.
Thank you.
So are we.
Before we lose them, could we ask John, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Maybe through the mic. If he wanted to talk to why the FinCom voted 6-2 to not recommend the school administration feasibility study?
They felt that it was an optional to push off, even though capital had whittled things down, serving on capital. We took the list and tried to whittle it down to really the most important. FinCom then felt that and the moving the antenna could be moved off, as I said, because we're looking at reevaluating 51 and tearing down the old fire station and 63. I mean, there's so much moving pieces. They were just like, okay, we'll just hold on these two. We'll push these off to May 21, that they were already scheduled for, earlier, and they already had been pushed off. So it was just part of that, well, what are we really doing with 51? What offices need to be there? Do we need to move the pole if we're not ripping down the building? It was that whole,
It's just kind of a puzzle.
it was a puzzle that they felt those two pieces could wait on.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't support them, it was more of a, let's just put them over here and wait
Yeah.
and see where we are.
I mean, I have to say that as I followed those, there was like that week with the Capitol meeting, the FinCom meeting, and the community preservation. I attended those, and I kind of agree with that, trying to take a step back and coordinate. So, in just having no personal experience with feasibility studies, can someone tell me about how long they take? Like, is there a big difference between now and Springtown meeting?
Well, at least lets them get going sooner, quite honestly. And the feasibility study will generally take maybe two to 3 months sometimes. Could take a little bit longer, Valerie, but that's generally the time frame.
I was at the Finance Committee meeting too, Bill was there as well. I think one of the concerns, just full disclosure, was, cash flow. That was one of the discussions, but also, to answer your question a little more too, and just timing, again, it's staggered. If town meeting gets moved to May, in theory, over the winter, there could be some work done on a feasibility study, because after this town meeting in 2 weeks, those funds would be available. There was some discussion that there are still some funds left over from 51 Main that could maybe be combined to relook at the projects together. It's a long, long process to build a building. I think, if you remember, when Stony Brook School was being built and just trying to find the right site and
Right.
the location alone is going to, be longer, so.
Granted, it won't be as complicated as building a school, but
No.
a school generally takes 5 years from the time that you put together the educational specifications, they're approved by the Department of Education, and right through the entire bidding process and the construction.
Am I correct that Dan, at one point, he had forecasted like all the buildings, and the school administration building, I want to say was 23, 24
To build?
Yeah.
to build.
I remember that as
So-
well.
We're going to run out of time if he slotted us to have it constructed at that point. For me, I don't want to run into that and then have that get pushed out even further.
So,
And I don't think by voting in support of this, we're not necessarily saying we're not in favor of kind of collaborating in some sense. I think there was some
Absolutely.
discussion that we'd be approving these funds for a feasibility study for the school building, if that also encompasses a conversation with Permanent Town Building Committee and other town needs that roll into what's happening with 51 and the need for a new home for the IT department. And I know there's also been discussion about the rec department and their future needs. So I think those collaborative discussions can still happen, but if we don't approve this feasibility study, there are no funds to allow it to move forward and to allow that collaboration to happen. I think it will be a collaborative process from all the discussions I've heard.
So, and just for clarification, because my oldest started here 10 years ago, how long was this building supposed to last, and what year are we on?
Yeah.
We're on, approaching year 19.
19, and how long was the building supposed to last?
3 years.
Yeah.
I remember the town meeting.
Right.
We were going to sell the building.
Yet another vote for us having the best custodians and maintenance staff on the planet that this building is
That's
still here, so.
So I will make a motion that the school committee recommends the Article 6 primary first motion and voice our support, particularly for the school administrative office feasibility study.
I will second.
Any discussion about the motion? Okay, all in favor? Great.
I'd just like to add that collaboration piece. I don't know how
Collaboration
the
is
school
gonna be
committee
key.
fits into the permanent town building committee, if we have a rep there or what, but maybe, I just think that seems like a really efficient, more efficient.
It's an excellent committee for.
Very
Yep.
astute.
Absolutely. And thoughts from the board? Do we want to take opinions on any of the other articles? We mentioned some citizens petitions. Would we like to take an official opinion on those at this time, or perhaps take one later, or on town meeting floor if the board so chooses?
No, I think we can wait till
Any-
the floor.
Any additional motions?
Just a quick
Valerie?
logistics question as a town meeting newbie. When we say on the floor, is that like that quick meeting beforehand? Because I wouldn't want to do anything that, I know everybody's working hard to make it as efficient as possible, so.
We would either do it in the quick meeting beforehand if we so chose, or, when we're, I guess, socially distanced, standing at town meeting. We've actually taken votes at town meeting while deliberations have been happening, and then
Okay.
we've gone to the podium and announced the vote of our board.
Okay, so
Sometimes
nothing
we-
that would like slow down.
Sometimes we've been asked to do
Okay.
so.
Got it.
That either a member of the public or during the course of discussion, has said, what is the school committee's position on this? And we've been asked, we've live voted and given them our
Okay.
response.
Thanks.
So that can happen as well. Anything else? Any other motions? Okay, hearing none. We have 2 agreements with the Westford Education Association. One is a side letter, which is a tweak, I guess is the best word for it, to our MOA addressing the hybrid model. This side letter was put into effect because the MERV 13 filters, which we would like to have installed in all of our buildings, were not available when students first entered the buildings. It was logistically impossible to acquire them. They've been on order from quite some time, and there have been subsequent delays. We are still waiting for those filters, and good news is it sounds like they're starting to arrive. But in the meantime, while we are waiting for those filters, we have agreed that all mask breaks for staff and students would take place outdoors until those filters are installed. So this is just a letter of agreement memorializing that, and I would like to make a motion that the school committee support that agreement and authorize me to sign it on behalf of the school committee.
Second.
But one
Any
question,
questions?
one question.
Yep.
So the filter they shipped last Friday?
The
filters shipped on
filters-
Friday?
The
They
filters
were,
shipped
yes,
Friday?
they shipped
Okay,
on
so
Friday.
when are we supposed to receive them?
Sometime before the middle of this week.
Okay, and then when can the installation be done?
And they'll be installed immediately.
Immediately, okay. So basically, within like a week or 2 weeks, the filters will be ready. So
This
basically,
first shipment.
okay, basically this side node will cover until we have the filters. Okay, yeah, because it says mask break outdoors. I'm thinking, oh, in the winter we don't want to have
Right,
mask break
that's right.
outdoors. So I'm just trying to say the time frame.
Yep, this covers us through the interim, and I'm sure if the weather is still nice, classes can still go outside.
sure.
And can still take mask breaks outside, and that would be encouraged, but obviously, there are going to be times that that's not possible.
Okay.
But yes, this covers the interim period.
Okay, yeah.
Any other questions? All in favor? Great, thank you very much. I will sign that this evening. The other agreement we have with the WEA is the memorandum of agreement regarding possible implementation of a period of fully remote model of learning. And you all should have received a copy via email. If approved by the board and signed tonight, all of these agreements are publicly available and posted on the website. But this agreement discusses synchronous instruction time. It memorializes that some of the agreements that we have reached under the hybrid agreement would continue under a fully remote model. Things like digital citizenship expectations and other agreements that we've already discussed, because we do already have remote learning as a component of the hybrid model. It also has some specific agreements about special education. The state has authorized that for some small select population of special education students, there might be continued in-person learning for those students who have extraordinary difficulty accessing remote learning in our school buildings, and what that would look like to make sure that students and staff are protected and safe. So this outlines some of those agreements that we reached, and I would again make a motion that the board authorizes me to sign on your behalf to this agreement that our negotiation team reached with theirs.
I second that.
And there was a lot of hard work from this negotiation team and from the WEA team.
Absolutely.
A lot of work went into this. Any questions or concerns? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Thank you for your support. The negotiation teams appreciate it. If only all of our meetings had gone so smoothly. The next order of business, and I know it's getting late, so pleasure of the board if we continue, would be the Assistant Finance Director job description. Still going? Okay, we are bravely carrying forth. Bill or Ingrid, do you want to comment on what we're being asked to decide this evening?
Well, this is a job description, and we have included in here requirement of a license. But basically, this is the job description that has existed for a while for that position, just slightly modified.
Can we just ask that Nina add it to this week's packet, since it was not in there, since we're officially making a vote on it tonight? It wasn't in this week's packet, it was somewhere lost in past packets. And so I just, for record keeping, if we can put the finance job description in this week's as well.
Any other comments or questions?
I did have one, the second page, and maybe it just needs an update. Does this person supervise anyone? According to your chart,
Yes.
it looks like this position would, and therefore supervision should not be NA. And certifications, as we know, if that's now going to be a requirement, that should be listed under certifications. I just wanted to reflect, because your chart had said differently.
So do we have a suggestion from the board? Should we take a vote this evening? Should we wait for an amendment and take a vote at a future date? With its inclusion in the packet, what's preference of the board? I'm just looking for some direction about how to proceed.
I mean, I think we can vote if we, with the friendly amendment to
Okay.
clean up the supervise and certification line items.
Agreed.
I'll state for the record, my concern with this is just adding a requirement of a certification could, in the future, hamper our ability to fill the position. And that is one of my concerns with it. I don't know if anyone else has comments or concerns for the record.
No, I mean, I had concern, but it does say the ability to become certified. No, I don't know what that, I feel like that gives us a little bit of room, but no, I mean, adding this, I suspect it's a fairly heavy licensure or certification that you'd need. And so it's not one that's added lightly to a job description. Go, yeah, take it.
So just the function of the job, the process of obtaining such a license does give, make sure that you cover all the breadths that are relevant to school finance. That would be, I think, highly valuable for the person in this job to have.
So that certification would be phrased as the ability to obtain, even if a job applicant didn't currently have it?
That's what it says here in qualification number 2.
Okay. I guess I'm just looking for a little clarification as to that qualification and what that means, that they have that certification or the ability to be certified as. I guess I'm just looking for some HR direction as to what that means.
I don't know if they need to have a certain schooling or a certain degree.
I can talk about it firsthand.
Yep.
Yeah, what
They're
kind of a team?
different, there are different paths, like many licenses in the Department of Education that you can take to obtain this license. You definitely need a certain level of education. They look at your work experience. They look at, your current ability to work in a school department environment. I know there were some in the licensure course that took about a year and a half that I did, that was sponsored by the MASBO, the Massachusetts Association for School Business Officials. You need practical time, so that people that weren't currently employed in the school system did internships in districts. I did various projects, Bill, that were outside of the scope that would benefit the district that I did on my own time, that would qualify for hours. I had a mentor in another district who I also did projects for to gain additional breadth of experience.
Is this typically a certification that if we were to employ someone, that we would be responsible for funding the certification process and classwork?
That wouldn't necessarily be a requirement. That would be something you could negotiate with a future applicant.
Other questions, concerns? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'm happy to bring more information about the licensure program if that's something that would help your decision.
It's up to you. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the job description as provided.
Oh, wait, with
With the friendly amendment.
With the friendly amendment.
Second.
With the actual
I wasn't sure how to say that, so I was like,
duties
wait.
on page 2.
I think that's a problem when too many people are doing different things.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second with a friendly amendment. All in favor? And all opposed? 4-3, did I count that correctly? So motion passes. Next order of business is the facilities position, request for approval.
Ingrid and I have been talking with Paul Fox for a while about the proration of his job responsibilities, the volume of work. And as you know, we have the money in the budget for the position that Richie Crocker formerly occupied. We chose to defer for a while filling that position, but Paul has come forward and spoken with Ingrid and I about the absolute necessity from his perspective of having a person to be sort of a boots-on-the-ground worker, facilities operations supervisor who will be out overseeing jobs, working on the planning of the jobs and general oversight, scheduling things, a little bit different than Paul's higher level of work. Now, one of the reasons we're bringing this is because coincidentally, the town lost a person who was part-time in engineering, part-time in facilities. And Jody spoke with me about a month and a half, 2 months ago, about would we be interested in combining this position that would help us, certainly in the school system, and would help the town with that portion of the former employee's position that was devoted to facilities. In the process of taking a look at this, we talked to Paul about what his proration of work might be moving forward. Once we dig out of all of the COVID work, much of which was devoted to the school system, and we looked at a 60-40 split, 60% devoted to the school system, 40% devoted to the town. As you know, now it's 75-25. So we spoke with Jody about that, and she was okay with that. We also talked about splitting this position 75-25, because that is the proration that we really anticipate this person would spend in terms of the total work assignment in the town. And certainly, we have the bulk of the square footage the bulk of the facilities work, and so she was agreeable to this also. So with this job description, we would be hiring an employee with 75% school, 25% town with that financial proration, and Paul Fox would move to 60% proration and work scheduled for the school system, 40% for the town. Ingrid, is there anything I've missed on that you can think of?
No.
So I know the hour is late, and this is the first time we're seeing this. My thought is this is a new position, and there's going to be a number of questions. I don't want to necessarily be in the position of making a decision one way or another on any new position. Certainly in a time of fiscal concern, new positions, I think, we have a responsibility to explore all the options and understand all of the implications. Would you be amenable to us conveying some questions before our next meeting?
Certainly.
And then, because I know I have a couple of technical questions
and I think
about
that's very fair.
how this position, interlays with other positions we've had in the past. I know we're changing some things structurally between us and the town, and there've been some retirements and questions about replacing positions. So I guess I would just want to understand the big picture.
That's
I think
fine.
would be important.
Sure, we'll be glad to
And I think
answer those questions.
that would help a lot. If other board members have questions, I'm happy to compile them and convey them, and maybe we can handle them all at once, and that would inform our discussion next time.
That will be fine.
That's good.
That's fair.
So we'll table this one for the moment. Fantastic. And warrants.
We still have to.
You do.
Yep.
I apologize. Alicia, I did.
I have them.
And I put
Thank
it
you.
in the chat, the numbers.
Fantastic, thank you.
So the warrants were paid last week because we got off a week.
So we are
and so Avery did
retroactively
sign. Yeah.
approving
Yes.
Avery's signature from
Yes.
last week. Great.
Okay. So motion to approve payroll warrant 2114 SP dated 10/1/2020 in the amount of $2,038,145.78.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Excellent. Motion to approve expense warrant number 2114 SE dated 10/1/2020 in the amount of $689,595.65.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And
So for minutes, these minutes are not currently in our packet. We're going to need to make sure we follow up and make sure they get into the document manager packet, but we all have them in our email. So motion to approve school committee meeting minutes, regular session dated 9/14/2020.
Second.
all in favor?
And motion to approve school committee meeting minutes, executive session minutes not for public release, also dated 9/14/2020. Those should be in the drive. Everyone should find them in the drive.
There's actually 3
Oh, there's,
approve.
okay.
I don't want to blindside anyone, but I sent an email on Saturday
Yes, yep.
mentioning all 3 and a link to them.
Okay.
If everyone's comfortable, I mean, those have been ready, they just missed the agenda setting with that rescheduled meeting. So I'd love to kind of clear the board, but I understand if people didn't miss that.
Pleasure of the committee. Would we like to vote on it this evening or hold it for our next meeting and take the vote at that time?
Can we hold it so that they're listed on the agenda? Because I just don't want, I know the public will go looking for it, and I'd rather be extra clear as to what sessions are approved and not approved.
I will take that former chair advice. Thank you. And we will make sure that they catch the next agenda.
Okay.
And so they will be on our agenda for our next meeting, which I suppose I should clarify for the public. I appreciate everyone's patience that we moved this meeting because it would have initially fallen last week on Yom Kippur. Our initial plan was to bump it one day to last Tuesday, but that date clashed with a select board meeting. So we ultimately decided to move it to this Monday. we have a scheduled meeting for next week. Unfortunately, we have another Monday holiday. So our intent was to hold our meeting on October 13th. That is currently up in the air. We need to have some discussions with Select Board. We are doing some joint items with Select Board. We also want to be there to partake in some of their discussions. So it's unclear whether our meeting will also happen on the 13th alongside, parallel to theirs, or whether we might move to a different date. That's still TBD. I'll get back to the board on discussions about that this week. And the public, you can always check the town website to know what decision we've made. But sorry, we don't have a final decision on that, but that will be made later this week.
Pending motion.
Do we have a personnel
Nope,
update?
Hillary, I made the
there's no
motion on the
personnel.
executive section,
I'm
executive
sorry.
session minutes from the 14th,
I apologize.
so I think we need to finish that.
I apologize. So there was a motion, was it seconded?
I thought I heard Valerie second it.
Probably, yep.
For the
But-
14th.
But, I'm sorry, that one's not listed either, though, right?
The
No, it is,
executive
yeah.
session,
I just
one-
feel that the executive session's not listed, we should table.
Right.
But the 14th is listed on the agenda. The executive session,
Regular.
That's regular, there's
Only
nothing
regular
listed
minutes.
for
Right.
executive
Oh,
session.
you know
Executives-
what?
Executives not listed.
I
None of
assumed
the
because it
executives.
was right underneath, it
Yep.
was the same date,
No.
then I withdraw my
All right.
motion.
That's fine.
Sorry about that. I assumed because the dates lined up that it was there.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Got it, okay.
And I had
The
seen the
hour is
14th,
late. See,
so-
this is why we're not supposed to go past 10. So that motion is withdrawn. Do we have a personnel update? I don't.
It was
believe
not
I
in the
saw one
packet.
Was it not posted at the DMS? Okay, if you want to hold until the next meeting, I'll be glad to, because I have a hard copy of it here. I wasn't
Okay.
aware that it wasn't
Nope,
posted.
wasn't in the packet.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Wacky
The package is really light this time.
Yes, it was.
It was a weird
Could we
week.
get the personnel update emailed, so we don't have to wait for the next meeting packet, too?
Sure, I could do that.
Okay, yeah, if we could email it for now and then put it in the next meeting packet, and
Yeah.
we'll discuss it at the next
Right.
meeting.
And then I think you had also mentioned we were going to get enrollment at the next one, which would have,
That's
that was
correct.
October 1st
That's correct.
date. Yeah.
Can we also see a pod breakdown? Just to see, I feel like we talked about how things might shake out so much in hypotheticals, that it would just be kind of nice to check in on how things really did shake out.
The numbers shook out.
Okay, final order of business would be adjournment to executive session. Do we, again, I'm looking for guidance from the board, given the late hour. Bill, I don't know what topics you have for that session. Should we go into executive session briefly?
I think 5-minute one.
A brief executive session?
Yeah, I think just to cover the couple topics that,
Okay, that would be my preference, but just looking for some head nods.
I know it's
That's what we're
late,
gonna
but
do. I know
hopefully
it's late, everybody.
5 or
This
10
was a long
minutes.
one. Okay.
Okay, motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to Unit A collective bargaining in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position. The committee will not return to public session.
Second. Avery can have it.
Avery got it.
Avery seconded. All in favor, roll call. Valerie.
Aye.
John. Ming Chen.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Aye.
Chris. Avery.
aye.
And I'm also in favor. We are adjourned to executive session. We will not return to public session. Everyone have a good evening. Thank you for sticking with us tonight.